Attention to Eskom's implementation of stage 3 load shedding and the recently approved Nersa tariff hike. This comes after a 10-month period without load shedding, which many South Africans hoped signaled the end of power cuts. However, Eskom has cited a perfect storm of breakdowns and maintenance delays, forcing the utility to reintroduce load shedding. Now, joining us to unpack this development is Kganki Matabane, CEO of the Black Business Council, and Hilton Trollip, an energy expert. Gentlemen, very good afternoon. Appreciate your time. Hilton, let me start off with you. Now, there's talk of a perfect storm of breakdowns. Could Eskom have avoided it with better planning?
Good afternoon, Hugo and Kganki, and your listeners. My father, who was also an engineer, used to say, we don't want to spoil a really good quarrel with some facts, but I'm going to do that. Eskom published its system status report in January, and this report says for every week for the next 52 weeks, what they think the risk of load shedding will be. And their columns going down with each weekend, and starting at the 27th of January, the column goes from yellow to orange, and it says orange between 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts of load shedding. That's 1 to 2 phases. Then on the 10th of February, it goes to red, which is greater than 2,100 megawatts of load shedding, which is short 2,000 megawatts or more short to meet demand and reserves. That's the fact of the matter. The thing is, the politicians can't, if they go on air and start spreading doom and gloom, they don't remain popular. Unfortunately, Eskom is at its board level quite highly politicized, so they're not going to contradict their political masters. So Eskom have got a situation. Also, the fact is that for the past 20 years, we have not had enough power stations on the system. Eskom has always been on the brink, on the edge, one way or another. So that's another fact. And then another fact, most of our power stations are more than 30 years old, some more than 40 years old, some more than 50 years old. They're old and unreliable. So when you look at Eskom's the system status report, it says that in making the assumptions about load shedding, they say we've got about 40,000 megawatts, of which 13,000, so let's say 13,000 are on unplanned outage. Let me compare that with you trying to run a fleet of trucks. You've got 40 trucks, 13 of them at any stage are broken down on the road, because they're old, they've been hammered, there's a history. So you're always living on the edge with this really unreliable fleet of trucks, with the ones broken down on the road and the ones left. You've got just enough.
Hilton, allow me to come in. We'd like to give Kganki a chance to respond, but I'd like you to think about the last 10 months, which have been largely successful, and think about, did Eskom wing it, or did they actually have a plan that worked? But no, let's talk about if you just hold that thought, hold that thought. They didn't wing it. Sorry, please hold that thought. Kganki, I'd like you to come in. Now, you represent Black Business Council. It's obviously been a slow January, as one would expect. January disease, people don't have resources, and just as businesses are starting to recover or inviting customers in, it's the end of the month. Load shedding kicks in. What are the implications of this on black businesses?
Good morning, Hugo. Good afternoon, Hugo, Hilton, and the viewers. We were basically caught off guard. This was unexpected, and as such, many people were not prepared, especially small businesses, because, as you know, black small businesses, most of them don't have necessarily the resources that the other people will have, but we are comforted by the fact that Eskom did indicate that the load shedding will only be for the weekend, and we believe the current leadership. We do have confidence in them. They are well-qualified people and experienced people. We don't think they can play politics and try to please politicians, and they've proven this thing over the past 300 or so days. What they are communicating is believable compared to the previous ones who will be telling us about the wet coal and all those fiction stories. So we hope they'll stick to their word, and by Monday we're going back to normal. We were expecting at least to have 365 days of no load shedding, and people were asking, why are we celebrating 300 days? We were saying, but we're celebrating because during the days of the incompetent director, we were basically in the dark every day. So we now have competent board, competent executives, and they are doing their best under very trying circumstances. So
Kganki, I'm going to have to interject to pick up on what Hilton spoke about. Now you're hoping that Eskom, you're hoping that the powers that be, the electricity minister, are telling the truth. What if they aren't, right? They've talked about the perfect storm. Now, the perfect storm was unforeseen, suggesting that whilst they might project that this electricity outage is for the weekend, it may not be for the weekend, it may go beyond the weekend, right? Then the issues of sufficient or insufficient infrastructure over the last 20, 30 years that has not been put in place. Do you not feel then that this could be a permanent fixture regardless of the competence? Because now it speaks to what we have in terms of infrastructure to bolster that competence.
Yeah, remember the maintenance is very key. So I've got like a 12-year-old car. Maintaining it very well. The car is doing very well under circumstances. So you'll expect an old infrastructure like that now and then to give you surprises. But we just need to make sure that we plan much better and work very well under those circumstances that you did not even create. So I agree with Hilton. The network is old. There hasn't been much planning in the past, but where we are, we need to deal with what we have and work with what we have.
So Hilton, Kganki is probably a lot more optimistic than you are, but over and above the challenges that you've spoken about, there's also this just shy of a 13% hike that Nersa has approved, compounding that situation, or does it offer some relief to Eskom? Will this increase in tariffs allow Eskom to better function, Hilton?
No, it won't, because we have a regulatory process where Eskom puts in an application for a tariff to cover costs, its operating costs, which include buying coal, paying its salaries, and doing maintenance. And they asked for a certain tariff. They were given about a third of what they asked for. Now, because they're a state-owned company, they don't have to break even. And for the past 20 years or so, on average, they've made a large loss. They're currently being bailed out this year, 58 billion, for 3 years in a row. So what happens is, to remain popular with the electricity customers, the government puts pressure on Nersa, political pressure, to not give Eskom the necessary tariff, because all of the electricity that is delivered is paid for by the customers. There's no other source of money, except when Eskom makes a loss, and it always makes a loss. It's way in the dwang. So what happens is, to stay popular with the customers, including the industrial customers who have got a hard time making a profit these days with the electricity reliability and costs, we keep the price down, and so Eskom doesn't get enough money to operate the plan which they put on the table for that tariff. So they have to start cutting costs. They can't cut them enough. And so they go into debt. And so instead of the customers paying for electricity, the taxpayers pay for electricity, and the whole governance system is undermined. So no, the low tariff, whilst popular, and I really have the greatest sympathy, especially for poor customers and struggling businesses. It's an unsustainable situation. We cannot continue to pay the electricity utility out of taxes. Those taxes, in terms of our democratic dispensation, aren't meant to go to productive assets. They're meant to go for education, health, etc., and they're getting the short end of the stick. So yeah, I'm very disappointed that once again we've chosen populism over pragmatism and over good economic sense. I think we should look after the poor customers with subsidies, which we do already. We should help businesses in other ways than trying to keep the electricity price low unsustainably through unsustainable tariffs. And we do need to also change the whole system. We need to build a whole lot more power stations. And the power stations we need so that we aren't always, Eskom isn't in a situation not of its own making, of not having enough power stations. We need to build them, and we can build renewable energy power stations and battery storage fast.
Okay.
And that is wait, let me tell you, it's a responsibility of the Department of Mineral Resources these days and Energy. We've had a number of bidding rounds to put new generators onto the system now. For 8 years, they've mainly failed through infighting in government between coal and renewable lobbies.
Okay, so according to Hilton, a lot of what's happening is a problem of Eskom, Kganki, but I think it's also important to give credit where credit is due. And the 10 months, as you've said, have been a great 10 months for the entire country. But there's also the issue that municipalities owe Eskom 78 billion, right? And they're being supported to the tune of 58 billion. So the problem isn't entirely Eskom, right? The municipalities are also part of the situation, because if they paid that 78 billion, I mean, how many of those problems that Eskom has would go away?
So, Hugo, I didn't say the problem.
I was asking Kganki to contribute.
Because we just go around allocating blame and we don't have solutions. Let's talk about some solutions. It's easy to blame Eskom, blame this, blame that, blame Andre de Ruyter, blame corruption. But what's the solution? The solution is build more power stations, and that's going to take time. And until we build them, we're going to be fighting like we're fighting, and we're going to be suffering like we suffer.
Fair enough. So we do understand that there is a need to build
power stations.
There is a need to build.
They're doing it exceptionally well. They're looking after those power stations like nobody else could.
Fantastic. So we are.
They don't have enough.
We are agreeable. We are agreeable on that. But I'd like us also to focus on what's potentially hindering Eskom from operating better in the circumstances. So without the new power stations, Kganki, there's 78 billion that is owed to them. What is the impact of an injection of 78 billion if municipalities did come to the party?
Yeah, you could. That is very, very, very. It's a very serious challenge for Eskom, and it's not necessarily caused by Eskom. It's caused by other things, including competence in municipalities, because most of the municipalities are dysfunctional. Hence, they are not able to come up with the money. There are a lot of leaks in the system. Some of the electricity gets stolen in the process. But I just wanted also to comment on the Nersa issue. The Nersa found itself in a very, very difficult position, because there's always going to be balance between affordability and availability. Because if you price electricity too high, and the economists will tell you that, and then we make it too high, and then it's unaffordable, you are in a way encouraging people who can't afford it to start stealing it. So you need to strike a balance. For example, small businesses won't afford a 30%, 20% increase. Even the 12% or so increase that was given, small businesses won't afford it, because that is way up inflation. There are other costs that the small business have to go through. So it's important that Nersa balances the needs of the consumers and the needs of Eskom. and then you can't go overboard. Otherwise, people will stop paying, because remember, the rich customers, especially the individual household, the rich ones are already on solar. So if you overprice it, my mother in Limpopo won't be able to afford it. So what will be the alternative? But again, I agree with you. Let's give credit where credit is. The rater was very incompetent. You can't compare the rater with the Denmark. You can't compare the previous board with the board led by Mutetanyati. So we need to give them credit. They've done a great job. Even when we were listening yesterday, we were listening to them. They were not coming with excuses.
No, they weren't. Sorry, gentlemen, we've run short of time. I'm afraid we're going to have to call an end to this conversation. Very entertaining. Appreciate both views from Kganki Matabane, CEO of the Black Business Council, and Hilton Trollip, energy expert. Much to talk about that we can talk about at another time. Gentlemen, thank you very much.